Hello, MotoAmerica fans, and welcome to episode 77 of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. I am not Carruthers, obviously. I don't have the golden tones that he does, but I'm Sean Bice, and I'm Paul's sidekick, both at the track and with a lot of the things we do with MotoAmerica, and of course on this podcast as well. So I'm kicking it off, but we have a really special guest today that is huge. He's hugely popular, and there's a lot of good things, good questions we want to ask him. And I'm going to pass it over to Paul now to give a little bit of intro because Paul, with the breadth of his experience in road racing, he probably remembers Ben when he first got involved in road racing back in the day. Is that right, Paul?
Well, my memory's not that great, but I do remember Ben from as long as I can remember. How's that? I mean, I'm fairly certain I've seen, if not all of his victories in the AMA series. I've seen a majority of them, including, his first Superbike win and probably his first Formula Extreme win and his first Superstock 1000 win and all that stuff. So I'm pretty familiar with his career. He had a fairly decent little career, He won a couple of titles here and there. So 3 Superbike championships, AMA Superbike Championships. Then he departed and went overseas and won the 2009 World Superbike Championship in his rookie season, which is I think people like to point to that as probably the biggest thing that Ben has done, because I think he caught everybody by surprise, and I think people quickly realized that the AMA Superbike series had some pretty damn good riders, because he went over there and basically kicked their ass. So that was kind of cool. I was actually there on a sad day for Ben and for all of us who were there when he I want to say it was 2013 at the Indy MotoGP. He got thrown off the Ducati that he was riding, landed again on the bad shoulder, and I remember going to his motorhome. His mom, Mary, had us all go to his motorhome for kind of like an almost impromptu little press conference so that he'd only have to talk at once instead of, 50 times. So we all kind of scrummed over there and went into his motorhome, and he was laying on his back on the motorhome couch, and he had ice on his shoulder, and it was all strapped up. And at that point in time, I don't think it was his official announcement that he was retiring, but he made it fairly clear that he was done. And just looking at his face and looking at him laying there, it was just one of those things. When I walked out of the motorhome, I'm just like, God damn, that kid, he's been through a lot. He's had a crazy amount of success, and it was just kind of sad to see it come to an end the way that it did. So I'll never forget that day. I'll also never forget when he won his first Superbike race at Fontana. And I'll never forget the championship battles he had with Matt Mladen. I mean, in 2006, he won his first title by 8 points over Matt. The next year, it was only 1 point. And then in 2008, he won his third in a row. And that season included 7 straight wins, which at the time was a record, and I believe it still is. But yeah, he was the real deal, and his career probably ended a lot sooner than it should have because of the shoulder injuries. But you know what? You look back at it, and he did everything the way that I'm sure he wanted to do it. So let's bring Ben in and have a chat with him. But Ben, thanks for joining us today, and it's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's nice to hear some of that stuff coming out from y'all, and like I said, it's good to be on.
Ben, let's start out. I want to ask you about, I want to talk about Yamaha a little bit. I always do this to our guests. I ask a question that's got about 5 answers to it. But I want to ask you what your relationship is with Yamaha now. I know that you did that, the 10th year anniversary. You got involved with that, and the 2009 season. So can you talk about that relationship? And the other thing I want to ask you as a follow-up is that year of World Superbike, this is a weird way to ask you, but did you expect that to happen? I mean, I know what riders think and riders expect to win, but looking back at what you did that year, it seemed to come out of nowhere with a new bike, and it just was crazy. So talk a little bit about that to start with, if you would, Yamaha, and then that year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously going into '09, there were we had tons of variables thrown at us, with new crew, new bike, new suspension, new tires. You got to learn, pretty much 80% of the tracks that you're going to. So it was, we knew it was going to be one of the toughest things that we had done. But coming from where we had come, we'd won 3 titles in a row, and I felt like I was on top of my game and just had everything together. And me and Tom were working good together. And so, yeah, I mean, going over there, honestly, I would have been upset if we didn't win. We wanted to do as good as we could, and I knew that we were, kind of outgunned in a lot of ways. But in saying that, yeah, I mean that was our full intention, was to go over there and win the first race at Phillip Island, which didn't happen. But that was our game plan. But we knew what we were walking into. It wasn't going to be easy. It obviously showed it wasn't easy. We had a lot of stuff out of our control that made the points gap get even bigger. And then, coming out of it and being able to close all those points up, it was just every weekend it was kind of racing for wins, and we didn't really have to think about so much of the championship. And we knew everybody, it was such a big bonus if it happened. It was just something I was going out to win races. And then kind of the way that the season was with some of the mechanicals and Fabrizio taking me out, I just kind of had to have that approach anyway. So it was just easy in that regard. But yeah, I mean, winning the title was great. And it was, one of the, like I said, one of the biggest achievements. I mean, probably the biggest, but I, don't know if it was the hardest year I ever had. But like I said, it was definitely in the top 2 or 3 of achievements in racing. And yeah, it was great. Like I said, couldn't take it away from anything back then. We had just a great crew with Yamaha, and just had it was kind of a bucket list situation on how it all went down. And then, went to GP, and just all that stuff happened. And now working with Yamaha a little bit, doing some ambassador stuff, and might go to Europe a few times, and ride with some of their guys on the track, some of their customer guys and stuff like that. So, me and Yamaha, we've had a long relationship. It's been good. Sometimes it was a little bit rough, but it's been a great manufacturer to me. And like I said, now we're just kind of working together on some easy stuff, and whatever comes.
Hey, Sean, we have some questions that we were able to get from readers, and Ben just mentioned Tom Hauswirth, so there's a question about Tom on here. And we might as well throw that in. I think the best thing to do is if we just kind of piece these things in as we go. But
Sure.
Ben, one of our fans wrote in and said to ask you what made Tom Hauswirth such a good crew chief for you.
Uh, me and Tom are pretty similar. Just personalities. We're kind of, I guess, a bit more introvert and don't like big groups of people. And, sometimes that comes off, I think, in the wrong way. But, it's just the way that we are, and it's the way that we approach racing. And on that aspect, we completely just kind of always saw eye to eye. He was able to help me as a young racer. One off season we worked on old tires. The next off season we worked on just complete fast laps with brand new tires in case we got hole shots. I think I was able to help him calm down a little in some of his ways, and we worked just really good together. And then, like I said, no matter what bike I was on, whether it be the Suzuki, the Yamaha, the GP bike, after you work with someone that long and you're fortunate enough to kind of build that surrounding, around you, it just didn't matter what bike I was on. If I told him this is what I felt, this is what I needed, he knew what I was feeling and what we had to do with the bike to change it. And it didn't matter what it was. So that's why it was so important to have Tom. I mean, he not only was one of the best crew chiefs, but the way that we worked together, the way that we went about, the race approach and the strategy, and we were really methodical about that stuff. He always was as a crew chief. And, for my age and all that stuff, I think I was really like that from a young age. Like I said, sometimes it didn't portray to the fans all that great because I wasn't, the most, outgoing person, but that's the way I have to be when it was racing. And that's the way he was. And we gelled. And again, I think we we helped each other out some in areas that we needed to, and we kind of became a unit, and that's how it was.
So let's go back and talk about AMA Superbike a little bit and how you kind of came up through the ranks, started out at a young age, and you really caught fire as you went along. Certainly when you were with Yoshimura Suzuki, the 3 championships that you had against some obviously stiff competition, including your teammate. That was a pretty amazing era for Yosh. You guys were winning pretty much everything. Was each year? How was each year? Did it feel like a continuation of your success, or were there struggles that maybe we didn't know about that still resulted in championships over that time?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Yosh years were probably my favorite years, racing, just because I could hand pick my whole crew, everything. We just got along together. Obviously, me and Matt were riding at a really high level, and we were just pushing each other to the absolute edge, and making it better and better. But like I said, those years um, were really great. Sorry, I missed it. I forgot what you asked me on your first question.
No, that's really it. It's really trying to understand, when you put together those 3 championships in a row, I wondered if it's like, okay, we got that one down, but there's still challenges every year, and certainly the competition
Yeah,
you were dealing with. So were there
yeah.
some
So
years where it was a tougher deal? Yeah.
so '06, I kind of would say was actually one of the easier ones. I think we did catch Matt off guard a little bit. He knew I was coming. He knew back in '03 in some of the games that he's tried to start playing in the team, and I knew it. He knew it. And it really, I just think that the change that I made from '05 to '06 is kind of like what we saw Garrett do in the middle of this year. And I really just was able to get the rest out of the bike. I showed up in '06 extremely fit, ready to go. I know he wasn't where he was kind of at the end of the year in '07. So honestly, '06 was a bit easier in that regard, but I broke my hand at Virginia on Saturday, in qualifying. And that's what made '06 hard, because I had to race that next day, with the broke hand, finish second in one, fourth in the other. And then 2 weeks later, we had to go to Atlanta and finish out, the season, and then go to Ohio and win it. So I had to race 4 races, 2 weekends with a broken throttle hand. And that really, that kind of closed the gap up a little bit, but we knew we could manage it to the end. So that made it a little bit, that was easier, but, it kind of made it a little difficult at the end. But that season, as in race wins, was probably the easiest. '07 was the toughest, for sure. That was the season that, when I look back, probably that I'm the most proud of, that I got the most out of myself. And then it came down to Laguna. Whoever won the race won the championship. So that year, and the way it ended, that was just that was the most special year for me. And then in '08, I think we had a little bit more of his number that year. And then, the points kind of got spread out in Atlanta when they had a little bit, they had the DQ or whatever happened. And then it was like a huge points gap. So '08 wasn't as difficult, but I mean, they were all more difficult than '09, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. And just as a follow-up question, just kind of to carry it forward a little bit, and I'm jumping around a little bit here, but you had to deal with obvious injury situations. You mentioned your hand, but we'll get into talking about your shoulder at some point here, which compounded things as you advanced in your career. But did you feel like when you went to AMA to, let's just say, World Superbike that year, or even when you went to MotoGP, did the competition seem a whole lot harder with every step up, or did you feel like, boy, I had as tough a situation in the AMA during that time period? What do you think?
Yeah, so I, Matt could ride. There's no doubt about it. So there was that, and it was tough. When I went to '09, it was the variables and some of the points gaps that had happened from Monza, from Fabrizio, from a couple. We had another DQ, so that's why the points got so big. But when you look at the race wins and all that stuff, I mean, the level of competition, it was deeper And it was definitely stiff, but it was not as hard to win those races as it was in AMA. That's just a fact. Not saying, again, those guys, they're not slow by any means, and a lot has changed, since then. But that year, compared to racing Matt, it just wasn't as tough. So there was that, and I kind of had that mindset coming from AMA anyway. Going to GP, I would never say the level of competition surprised me. The only, two people on a motorcycle, I watched Marquez a little bit, but Casey, just did some stuff that blew my mind, at certain times. But everybody else, honestly, I mean, yeah, really, really fast guys, top level, no doubt about it. But, the biggest thing with GP is I just don't feel like I ever got the most out of myself. And I never felt 100% comfortable on those bikes. And it's just, people don't understand the difference between those bikes. It's huge. And, I kind of grew up on the last bit of not having traction control and electronics and the bike sliding and moving around. And then, you go to World Superbike and it's like Pirelli's, you're learning, all the electronics are kind of ramping up at that point. And then you jump into GP and you're going back 200 cc's with max, corner speed. The bikes really don't slide at all. They don't move much on entry. And they're just huge differences. So honestly, I mean, I would say there was only 2 or 3 races in my GP career where I felt like I was able to get what I could get out of superbikes, and I felt like I was riding at that limit. The other races, I mean, I felt good. It was just one of those things. I never felt like I could gel and work those bikes out to get the most out of them. And it's it's a bit of my style and the way it is, but it's tough. And you see Bayless and all those people. I mean, it's massive talents, but those bikes are different. They're much different to ride.
When you make the move to go to Grand Prix racing, is it a step up in the whole pressure of the situation as well compared to World Superbike?
When I was in 2008 time, when I went into the MotoGP paddock, it was like, holy shit. It's real. This is MotoGP, and it was with Rizla Suzuki, and I could feel the importance of GP, but it didn't mess with me. But yes, I mean, I could feel it. But when I got to in 2010, there was some pressure and hype coming because we had wanted the world title in Superbike and the American coming in. So yeah, people were expecting stuff, but honestly, it wasn't at that point from what I had kind of been through and where I was in my career. It didn't feel like a pressure step. It really didn't. It was just, I knew it was going to be different, and I still had a lot of learning to do. And that's the way I looked at it. But no, I mean, I didn't look at it like that. The only, I'd say the difference is just the way the paddock is in general. It's a little colder feel. People kind of mind their own business more, and they don't hang out as much as AMA Superbike and World Superbike. So in that way, it feels kind of like that. But I mean, no, I never looked at it like that.
So this bleeds us into one of the fans had asked this question. They had a 2-part question. The first part was, what did you like about racing in AMA, World Superbike, and MotoGP? I think you kind of answered that, and that would take a little while for you to just kind of repeat some of that. But let me ask you the second part of this person's question, which was, which series was your favorite?
I mean, World Superbike, there, like I said, it was a bucket list year of just how everything was. It was just really cool. We were able to win the title, a lot of cool stuff. But honestly, and some people know this from interviews, but maybe some don't, and it could explain me a little bit more. But with AMA, I loved it. I loved driving around. My little cousin, we were young, had a motorhome, cruising the country, Jamie hacking. We went everywhere together. We trained together. We road trip together, and that was my gig, and that's what I love to do. I hated flying. I don't know why. I'm just terrified of it. So I would never fly. So honestly, I can say that I never was going to go to Europe until what happened in 08, and that's it. When the economy collapsed, Mel Harris, told me, he said, you need to get to Europe. So I picked up the phone to Yamaha America, and I said, hey, can y'all get me a ride over here because all this is happening? And they were just like, no, man, we got to get you to Europe. So I went to World Superbike. But I mean, if it was up to me, if nothing happened in 08 and all the big changes and stuff didn't happen, I never would have went to Europe. And it's not because I didn't, want to, or I mean, I didn't think about it. I knew that we could be over there competitive. Um, but it's just, I'm like that. And again, like I said, I'm more of an introvert that doesn't, I'm kind of into my stuff, and I love traveling. I love my motorhome, my dogs with me, staying inside the US. And it wasn't anything against Europe. It's just, I knew the travel schedule. I knew all the stuff that went with it. And honestly, it's just, it wasn't a huge goal of mine. But it wasn't something I was opposed to doing if it had to happen, and it had to happen. So we went over there and did the best we could. But no, I mean, my plan was, if you go back and listen to my interviews, I wanted to be the winningest AMA rider and beat Miguel's records and stay put.
So Ben, this is a perfect segue for something we wanted to talk to you about. Paul, I want to jump in with this a little bit because we want to talk to you about two riders. One that's not in our series this year and moved up, but certainly want to talk about Cameron Beaubier, who we know you've had some involvement in and have coached him up a little bit, and you got involved in helping Garrett. I want to start by asking you, Cameron has indicated that he seems like he still has a desire and a passion to go over to Europe, but for the time being, he's happy where he is, and he's a fairly reserved guy like you, keeps to himself a fair amount. So, do you understand the mentality that he has about maybe not so fast about going over there, and conversely, the fact that you guys have gotten involved in helping Garrett Gerloff and what you did for him? Can you compare and contrast that a little bit, the mindsets of those two riders?
Yeah, I mean, both, love Cameron. Worked with him for a couple of years, and when it comes to Cameron and Garrett going to Europe, 100% both of them obviously have what it takes to go over there. I was in Cameron's ear, years ago. Still would help him, right now. If he picked up the phone and called me and said, "Hey, what can you do? Can you help me? Can you make calls?" 100% would do it. And then with Garrett, he's always been quite a ways behind me, but he's came up in the same organization as me in Texas. So I've been seeing his name a lot, but we just never knew each other that much. And it was one of those things where I've watched him, for the last couple of years, and he's been riding good, but he's been riding around on a super bike well, but not fantastic. And then middle of last year, kind of, the race before Laguna Seca, I could see it. I mean, he clicked, and it was like me from 05 to 06. And instead of riding around on a super bike, he was pushing it to the limits, making it work like they can. And, I saw that at Laguna. I was there, shook his hand after the race, congratulated him. And then, I was going to Portugal, a few weeks after that. And he called me up and he just said, "Hey, man, what are the chances of, what are you thinking about, me getting over there?" And I said, "If you can do it," I said, "I'm telling you right now, go." I said, "You have to." And I said, "You're ready. And, just let me know. I'll help wherever I can." And he said that he wanted to do whatever it took, and picked up the phones and started just kind of calling everybody and made it happen. And it was, there's a lot of people involved. I know Josh was involved with it, Josh Hayes, and I was talking with Dossley. Herbie Blash, I talked with him a lot, and I think he's actually one of the ones that really helped out. But yeah, I mean, we had an American that's ready to go, and got over there and hoping that, he can, hopefully we get to, see some racing this year. But yeah, the kid's got a lot of talent, got a great mentality, about it. And, same thing with Cam, though. I mean, Cam's a bit older than him, and he 100% has the talent to make it and, to do well over there. Who knows what they can really do till they get there and things shake out. But in the same time, I can understand, Cam's point of view. He's a little bit older, he's got a house and he's kind of got more of a family thing going on. So I get it. I mean, that's his choice, and I respect it, but if he called me up and said, "Hey, I want to try to get over there next year," I'll do the same thing I did for Garrett and pick up ring everybody's doorbell and get them, get their attention at the table and see what can happen. And that's what happened with Garrett. And luckily it worked out. And, now we'll just wait and see what happens.
Ben, what do you think's been the big differences to why you've basically been the last guy that we've been able to put over there with some success? I think Garrett gives us a lot of hope for that. But what do you think has been the issue that's kind of had this sort of lull in Americans doing well internationally?
Well, I mean, what happened back in '08, and '09, that was just out of everybody's control. And it definitely put a pretty big dent in it. And then, it followed up with the other organization, just didn't help with all that. But I mean, now that we're back to where we're at, honestly, when I look at it and what I know from being over there and how the bikes are, if you look at all the last American racers, that were kind of at that level, Hopkins, Nicky, me, Colin, I mean, everybody was on 125s and 250s. And when you're that age, when you're at that 12 years old to 15 and 16 before you get on 600s and 750s, and maybe you don't even get on those, you've got to be on purpose-built race bikes to get to that level, And I've just kind of always said that it's the analogy of like, you can take the best rider, and if you've got them riding every single day on a TTR 125 with two other great riders, and then you give them 3 months or 4 months or not even that, or just a wild card, and you say, okay, now from your TTR 125, go jump on a YZ85. I don't care who you are. You don't know the limits of what a motorcycle can do. So you're not finding and you're not progressing from an early age. And that's what it is. I mean, we've got to see 125s, 250s, Moto3 bikes or Moto2 bikes blended in with what's happening so the kids can learn how high the bar can be on purpose-built race bikes, because you can get on a superbike and do the same thing. If Garrett rides a superbike, and finds that to that limit, he gets on a GP bike, it's got 20 more percent, 15 more percent of absolute grip and frame rigidity and more electronics. So there's these steps. And again, if you're not getting taught from a young age, of what motorcycles can do and you're riding the right ones, I think it sets you up, where you're just behind the ball for a long time. And you've got to be, on fire between 16 and 20, you got to be. So that's the way I look at it.
So are you talking about, do you think that a step for MotoAmerica would be something to work towards, would be having a Moto3 type bike?
A Moto3 type bike or a Moto2 type bike for sure. I don't think you have to follow the absolute rules of Moto2 or Moto3, but those chassis, yes. Mm-hmm. But like where Moto2, where they have the Triumphs, I mean, if you wanted to say, to keep the manufacturers, more involved, which we need, Yamaha's, Honda, Kawasaki, and Suzuki, you can run their 600s, but this is the rules for the engine. It's super stock rules, and you got to run it in a Moto2 chassis, and then you can have, your 14 and 15, I was riding a TZ250 when I was 13 and 14, which is a Moto2 bike. So, mm-hmm. That's what I think. And I've kind of seen in the last 10 years-ish, the Americans in general, it just seems like they've kind of ridden smaller bikes too long. And it can be because there's not enough teams, obviously, to do that. But, when I was 17, I was riding a 200 horsepower Formula Extreme bike. And so was Nicky, so was Curtis, so was Hopkins, so was, everybody. So, you got to look at what we did growing up, and that's riding GP bikes. And then we were on fire-breathing thousands, and we were 17 and 18 years old. And that's why, I mean, we were able to go over there and do what we did. But I really think it's more based around how we rode 125s and 250s from 12 to 15. And it doesn't have to be the two strokes, but it has to be purpose-built race bikes if you're going to, breed these kids to go over to Europe and excel, or you've got to ship them over there when they're 14 and have a whole lot of money to keep them over there. That's the deal. I mean, that's I think that's 100% true,
We've seen a couple of different pathways that some of the younger riders have taken already up through MotoAmerica, even though we've only been around for 6 years. But, mm-hmm. You think about like some of them have gone that KTM Cup or Junior Cup, they've gone up to Super Sport. But you take a kid like Alex Duma, who started on RC Cup and then, became Junior Cup. But he went to Twins Cup because of it seemed like a better way for him to go. But now, this year he's got on 1,000. He's going to be racing stock 1,000, and we've seen it with Ashton Yates too. He kind of started So, do you think this idea, to your point, Ben, about these kids getting on thousands? I mean, the one thing about Ashton and Alex is they're tall kids, so they fit the
Hmm.
bike pretty well. But do you think that idea of having a pretty big carrot in front of you, as far as displacement of the bike or performance of the bike, is a good thing to really advance yourself?
I mean, if you're at the level of those guys, and kind of where we were when we were 14, you can do it, you can handle it. Like I said, I think actually some people, they're staying on small stuff too long. We're not. When I was on 15, when I was 15 years old, I was racing the 600, but I was riding track days and private days on a 750 and a 1000. And yes, I could handle it. And I've seen Rocco get on a BMW 1000 and he can handle it. But, I just kind of think again, like you look at someone like Alex Dumas, if what I don't even 100% what he's done, coming up, but I know he wasn't on a 125, 250, a Moto 3 or Moto 2 bike. And I would say as a blanket statement that someone like him, and there's obviously a couple kids in that age that if they were riding, if they ride a Moto 3 bike and a Moto 2 bike, for those kind of 3.5 years, when they jump to that next category, they will be faster. And it's just because the bikes that they were, on were just capable of much more corner speeds, much, all that stuff.
Let's talk about Joe Roberts for a minute. We've seen some articles and stories about with interviews about Joe, and some writers have commented on what he did, but I didn't see any comments from you on it, and I know you pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Were you surprised at what he did, and what do you think is going to, well, who knows what's going to happen with the season? It's kind of too sad that ended up happening, but it kind of clicked for him this year. Do you think it clicked like it did for Garrett last year? Do you think, what do you think of what he's doing at this point, Joe?
It's hard to say because Joe's been over there, for a couple years, and I haven't been able to follow a bunch, of what he's been doing, and he hasn't been, right up in the front the last couple of years. So I it's hard to say, but I do know he there's a couple chassis, over there that maybe don't work near as good as the Kalex or the other one, whichever it is. And I think that could have been, quite a bit of it, for sure. But again, like I said, I don't know all the details of how, he's come up in the last 2 or 3 years, but no, I did start following him, kind of later on last year, and saw what, he turned it up to 10, in testing and in the start of the year, and looked fantastic. And yeah, I mean, a lot of it could be, Hopkins is working with him. I've messaged John quite a bit, and I actually did message Joe, during the Qatar weekend, just kind of, giving him some support and, saying good job. And, so John, I think, is definitely somebody good in that corner, having just somebody that you can confide in, or that's backing what you're saying, or just agreeing with you. It's just confidence, and it was a lot of what I had with Kevin. And again, it's going to be nice to see more of it, and some consistency and all that stuff once the season, comes on. But with Joe, I mean, it's awesome to see. But again, why it's clicked, I think it's a bit of John, and I think it's a bit of the bike change, from just kind of looking at it like that. But like I said, he's looking strong, and hopefully we can get back to racing, later this year, and he can pick up where he left off.
Speaking of the get back to racing, I mean, obviously as a former racer, you've never had to face anything like this, but how difficult must it be for those kids, and well, even especially maybe the older guys that are in the close to the ends of their careers, like to live what they've lived through so far this year, with the potential that, like, hey, are they going to get to race? I mean, how would you approach that?
I mean, that's when you just got to go back into, what I would think if I was racing, and it's tough. I mean, it's not easy. They just got to, be patient. They're going to keep training, doing all that stuff. But it's, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the air because just people don't know. A lot of the manufacturer, there's just a lot of uncertainty right now, and it sucks, but, like I said, hopefully everybody can get back doing something. I think the World Championship racing is going to be tough this year to have it, just with, the risk of what's going on, and just all the everything. With MotoAmerica, I think there's definitely a possibility that things can, get kicked on again, and finish some races this year, or get some races in. But But yeah, it's tough, man. It's just nobody. The problem is nobody, unless you're over 90, 95 years old, nobody's seen anything like this ever. So it's just, everybody kind of has to come together right now and just be patient and just know that, the next few from 2 months to 6 months or whatever, it's more trying to get back to, next year of normalcy and try to bounce this. But for a rider, it's tough right now, because you're so focused, you're wanting to go, you're already ready for the start of the season. Some riders, got hurt, so it's going to work into their favor. Some people might be retiring, i.e. Rossi. You don't know. And it's just, it throws a lot of stuff, up on what's going to happen next year or the end of this year. So I guess we just got to wait a little bit longer to find out.
Yeah, I mean, you live and die by a calendar when you do this, and suddenly the calendar doesn't mean anything anymore. I've got a fan question here for you. Is there a rider that you wished you could have raced against that you didn't get the chance to? Is there any one guy that stands out? I'm sorry?
Bayless.
Oh, nice. That would surprise some people, I think.
No, I mean, just the way that, the way that I rode and, the way that I could see he rode, it would be, it would be clean, but it'd be everything. And I mean, that's just, I can tell that's how we both rode. And I'd have loved, he retired right before I got there. And I know he was watching, what I was doing that year and at Phillip Island when he handed me the Super Bowl trophy. And I know he was wanting to be in those leathers. And I just wish that he would have stayed, another year because, man, it would have been fun. It would have been really good. So that's the one person that, yeah, I would have really liked to race for sure. There's a lot of people that I would have loved to be able to race against, but he's definitely one, because it was so close to my prime and he was still at the top of his game. And yeah, would have liked it.
That would have been fun.
Ben, when we had John Ulrich on a couple weeks ago, I asked him a question that the answer was about probably 45 minutes long. So this question I'm going to ask you, don't be afraid if it takes you this long to answer it. But it's a question that I have that, it might seem like a dumb question to you because you think that people know this, but I see from fans, people don't really quite grasp the physiology of what happened with you, your shoulders. Can you kind of explain why you're not still racing so people get that?
Yeah. So, I mean, my right shoulder is just, it's not, I wouldn't say it's non-existent, but I mean, I've had 7 surgeries, into that one shoulder, and it's just basically the soft tissue that's inside the joint. Just there's not much left in there, so I don't have much stability inside my joint. And it was one of those things. There was one surgery that I could have done to maybe try to fix it, but it was also a surgery that if it went wrong, it would have been extremely painful and had to, have another surgery and all that stuff. And at that point, I was going to be racing for another, 3 years or something like that. And it was bad. It just got to the point where talking with the doctor, he said, it is unsafe for you to be out there. And I was like, 100%. I mean, right now, yeah. I mean, there's just, I can't hold on to anything. And I remember I was at Mugello in 2013 and the chicane that goes back to the final corner, to left, right. And I came out of that right hander and I had a nice slide going, nothing major at all. But when I got to the paint that had more grip, the thing hooked up and it kind of twisted itself into some knots, nothing bad at all. Still wide open. I'd never even say anything about it, or not even a TV commentator really. But when the front tire set down, the thing kind of snapped and it pulled my shoulder out and I could not let off the throttle. And I missed my braking zone by, probably 50 meters. And it was enough where I could still slow it down to get into the gravel trip and not, hit the wall that was there. But in saying that, if that would have happened in the first 3 laps of the race, I would have collected 2 to 3 people at 160 miles an hour. So that was when I knew, I was in trouble, and I kept trying. Then I pulled out of that weekend, did more rehab, came back to Indy. Obviously that happened, and it was just, it was a mess, man. And it sucks because, most of my career, I didn't really have a lot of crashes. In an AMA Superbike, it was like 2 crashes a year. not many injuries, but no, just really unfortunate with my shoulder. And once anybody knows that, if you've done, my GP race that I won with a broken tailbone. I'd broken it in the Silverstone crash 2 weeks before that. And, I raced with broken hands in AMA. And it's one of those things where certain types of injuries, 100%, you can man up through it. And it's just pain. But when you're fighting a big joint like that, that's not stable, and your shoulders are pretty much your most important, power joint on bikes when it comes to left to right through chicanes or holding yourself up, 2 Gs under braking when you're going 210 miles an hour. That's your biggest weak link on a motorcycle, so that was it. And, I just, it sucks sometimes, but we had a lot of good things happen in racing, and I've got a great family now and things are nice, but it cut it a couple years short, and I wish I could have retired in a better way, but it's not perfect for everybody, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mean to belabor the bad stuff on that. It seems like sometimes people don't still quite understand it. But we saw it happen with Neil Hodgson, with Eric Bostrom. When it gets the shoulder, you have a situation with the shoulder with what you're dealing with braking and things like that on the bike, and even the pulling G's from acceleration. It's obviously hard on that joint.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the next question I have, and this is actually from a fan, and it's a good one. I would ask this one too myself. But would you ever consider running a racing team? I know you've got Elbowz Racing for bicycles, but would you have a road racing team, like a MotoAmerica team?
I wouldn't be against it. No. It would have to be, the right way, and I'd have to be able to, not have obviously, full control, but I'm only going to do stuff if it can be done the right way in my eyes, when it comes to, mechanics and how the team's set up and all that stuff. So, I mean, it wouldn't be something that I would say no to. But I'm just the type that when I get into something, it's going to be 110%, or I'm not going to mess with it. So if it was something where, Tom came in and he was kind of, as in some of the crew chief for the team and overseeing that stuff, and I could handpick some of the guys, then yeah, because I do believe when it comes to that stuff, there's definitely a lot of the intricate number stuff that I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff I feel that, I know from racing, or just what needs to be set up to give you the tools to win, for sure. So, I mean, it's something that I'd never say no to, but, the opportunity hasn't happened. I haven't really, looked for it, but yeah, I mean, like I said, if it was the right way and all that, I definitely wouldn't be against it.
There are a lot of former riders in the paddock, obviously, in all levels of the sport, and we see this a lot with. And I always wonder the success that they have as a member of a team, whether it's a crew chief or whatever. Do they feel the same level of satisfaction and happiness being on the team as being the rider? Do you think if you owned a team, would you get as much satisfaction out of seeing your rider win races or a championship as you did when you did it yourself?
Yeah, I think that is possible, actually. Just because I've just helped, a few people, along the way, and when I see, what they do with it, no, it's a great feeling. So, I mean, if it's something that, yeah, you're kind of a little bit responsible for, and you're trying to find that way, I mean, it might not be quite as much as, that win or that last lap pass and all that stuff, but it's damn close, and you can see it with Hopkins. And I mean, I can just, with talking with him, I can tell, how fired up he is, and just working with Garrett, again, we're not working every day together, but for, a good month, we were talking for 4 times a day, when we were trying to make all this happen and all that. And when I saw it actually happen, and, I felt like I was kind of one of the parts that was able to get it, there, or at least get everybody to the same table and figure it out as quick as possible. It was a huge, satisfaction. But, in the same time, I told him, like, hey, I don't want anything. I said, you can remember me, that's fine. But, I said, I don't want anything. I don't want to, a thank you. That's cool. But, that's it. And I just told him this is how I would do it. This is the approach I would have. And if I was hiring a manager, this is who I would hire, which he did. And, just kind of got him, his surroundings as good as I could, for him. And he's, HJC helmets and A-Star leathers and a Yamaha, and it looks pretty similar to '09. So we'll just see, and I know it's different expectations, but, I'm looking forward to it, and wouldn't be surprised, if they had a normal season. I said this year, I've talked to a lot of people that, I'm not going to sit there and say he's going to go win 5 or 6 races, but if you told me that he's going to win a race or two, in his first year, I mean, I'd believe it. So, so yeah, there's some good satisfaction with doing that stuff, no doubt.
Well, we can close this out with one last question. It's some of it you've probably already answered a little bit, but one of our fans says if you could give one on track and one off track piece of advice to Garrett Gerloff for his first season, what would they be?
Just off track, just be as aware as possible. Do your diligence when it comes to working with the guys and being a part of it, and just learning. Just kind of trying to be a sponge right now. And then when it's on track, just know, every time you leave pit lane, you're there. You might not be Johnny Ray yet, but you're there. You've arrived. You're just, when it comes to talent, you're as good as anybody on that. But there can be guys that have certain situations like Johnny Ray. Like I feel like he's built, his surroundings kind of like how I did when I was racing, and he'll be tough to beat. But, when you're there and you're rolling out on the track, and that's what I'd be saying if I was sitting next to him, I was like, dude, congratulations. You're here. You're now it's kind of your chance and your next step. So that's what I would tell him, always know that you belong there and your day's coming. So.
All right. Well, we can end it on that note, and let's all hope that Garrett listens to you, and he's a pretty good listener. So let's hope that he not only listens to you, but has some good fortune and sort of follows a bit in your footsteps. We're all hoping that he does, and we all think he can. So
I hope so.
As long as he thinks he can, and I think he does, I think he's on the right path, and he'll be on his way.
Yeah, no, the kid's, he's got the talent, he's got the mentality, he's got the that fan favorite thing about him. That was, like I said, that was something I didn't have, and he can be out of the box and wild and smiling and yelling and happy, and not that I wasn't happy, but I'm just I'm stoked to see him in that way and with the talent that he's got, because we need it. America needs it, and racing needs it, and I think he can make a big impact as long as everything just works smooth with him for a couple years, and he can find his rhythm and get there. I expect big things from him. Just not quite the first year, but yeah, I see him winning a world championship at some point. Hope so.
One other quick memory, Sean. I'm not sure there was ever more uncomfortable press conferences than Matt and Ben and whoever got third for a couple of those years. But I don't know who was more uncomfortable, Ben or the journalist. But there was times when it was touch and go, and people were scared to raise their hand and ask a question. So, but anyway, Ben, it was nice chatting with you again. It's been too long, and stay safe with your family and stuff, and we'll get through this little hiccup in our lives and move forward. And also, thanks for all the help you've given Garrett, and I'm sure you'll continue to help him, and we'll see where that goes, and hopefully we can all start racing again here pretty soon.
Yeah, hopefully summertime or right around then. It'd be awesome to see y'all be able to get back to racing and see what goes on this year. So let's cross our fingers.
All right, we hope we see you at a MotoAmerica race this year.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, we do, Ben. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for being on.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, guys, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, we do, Ben. Thanks so much. Yeah.